today's topic is Punk CX, an anti-framework that simplifies CX and CX insights. Our guest today is Adrian Swinscoe, CX Punk, best-selling author of How to Wow and Punk CX, Forbes Contributor, Keynote speaker, and CX advisor. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey, Frank, how are you doing? Nice to be here.
Maybe can you lead us to why it's called Punk CX and what's the main message of it?
The main message comes out of it's like a sense of frustration, which is sort of pure punk in of itself, right? And so the short backstory to it is that I was in a pub with a friend of mine back in December 2017, drinking Guinness with my friend Oshin. We're getting quite drunk. He's in the CX space. We were having a bit of a moan about what's going on. And because we saw all this activity and all this investment, but not a lot of significant improvements. And I guess in a moment of clarity, I just blurted out, I wish somebody would do something a bit more punk. Now, I'm a fan of punk music. I'm not original punk, but like a more of a post-punk sort of thing. I'm originally a sort of new wave, sort of ska sort of guy. But punk is, and the very idea of punk is something that really resonated with me. Now, I because of the drink, I probably forgot that idea. Then it popped back into my head again in sort of June of 2018. And I started to explore this idea about what does punk and CX, could they go together? And it made me think about where punk music came from. And punk music exploded at the back of progressive rock in the 1970s. And progressive rock was this popular, but also super elaborate and technical and kind of genre of music that was all about how many kind of organs you could play at the same time and how many notes you can have in your solos and 13-minute songs and stuff, which is all about the musicians and their own virtuosity than it was about anything else. And it got accused of basically being more interested in itself and disappearing up its own arse. And punk turned around and went, I don't need to have a PhD in music. I just need to pick up some drumsticks or a guitar or write some lyrics and just try. And it struck me that the way that the experience space had developed, that it was starting to look a lot like progressive rock did in the 1970s. You know, overly codified, benchmark, metric, frameworked, maturity curves, blah, blah, yada, yada, blah. You know, it's all the same. But yet we're in danger sometimes of losing sight of who we're here to serve, i.e. our customers. And it made me think, well, if that's true, if it looks a bit like progress, then therefore what would a punk version look like? And my thesis is that, like punk, I don't have an answer. The book was, I call it a visual slap in the face for the customer experience industry. I am trying to advocate for better outcomes and better thinking and different thinking. I don't care how you get there. I just want you to get there because I believe that we can. And I believe that there's like 101 different solutions to a particular kind of problem, but I want us to look for those solutions and to have the bravery and the courage to look at things differently.
Let's dive into it a bit more in detail. So you're saying that all the elaboration is partly ineffective or serves itself, and now you don't have an answer, but basically you are saying, hey, think again, right? Mm-hmm. But what tips and advice gives the book so that think again can be successful?
So there's, I know that you look at success drivers and you talk about insights and insights professionals and everything else. So I think the thing that I think about this, so in the book, I think I mentioned this one quote, and it's a quote from a Polish American linguistic scholar, and forgive me if you've heard me say this before, because I get quite probably quite boring about this, but I repeat it again and again because it's a beautiful quote. one was a gentleman called Alfred Krzyzewski, and he says the map is not the territory. And what he means by that, I believe, is that maps are really useful to help you understand kind of how things are, but they don't tell you what's going on the ground, right? It doesn't tell you if there's a pothole over there or there's a pothole over there, or that a cow is going to be crossing the road at some point down, in the future. The map can't tell you that. But and if you think about what dominates the experience sort of space, is people talk about data and data-driven decision making, and the data we can derive from insights and so on and so forth. But data is like the map, right? But it's not the territory. And sometimes we end up kind of like taking kind of distant data and thinking that it's an accurate representation of kind of reality. But the key is, and this is the punk bit, is that you've got to understand that, and you've got to be not comfortable with that and want to go further, to go beyond the data, to see the territory, to understand the data in context, in those individual contexts that are kind of customers, to understand what it really, really, really means. And that's my point, is like going, you know what, if you're just showing up and painting by numbers, you're not going to create art. Yeah. And that's one of the first tracks I used in the book. I asked this question, are you an artist or are you just coloring in? And most people are just coloring in, expecting to produce art.
Yeah, that's a good metaphor. I will steal it. Can you translate this into example actions you would derive from that for enterprises? So what would this mean actually? What should they do to improve the CX? Or what is an example someone did based on this knowledge?
Right. So here's an example. So there's an example that a guy told me is Andy McMillan, who's the CEO of a company called User Testing, who they're a big insight sort of company. And they told us about, or he told me rather, about a client that they had who was going, they operated predominantly online, or they had a combination of things, but they were talking about their e-commerce part of their business. And then into their heads that a frictionless experience was the most important thing. Right? Because that's what everybody was talking about. Everything had to be friction free. Because so they end up looking at their data and understanding and interpreting kind of their data and using that to try and pinpoint where the most the highest levels of friction were around their whole checkout e-commerce experience. They went through this big program, removing all the friction and everything else. And yeah, brilliant. They were successful. Everyone went straight through their checkout, super quick, right? The problem is people went through and never came back. And they were horrified at this. They were like, why? We made it really easy and friction-free from them. Kind of like, why are they not coming back? And then they really started to dig into their data and really understand and talk to their customers. And what the data failed to tell them, that the friction that their customers were going through as they compiled their basket of goods and customized the thing that they wanted, that friction was the thing that was creating value for them and the sticky relationship with that brand. And so when they unpicked all of this sort of stuff and went, actually, customization, the process of it, and actually there's a difference between good and bad friction and things. And that if you go past the data and really contextually understand it. And so that's my kind of point about that, is like, punk was also about this thing around question everything, anything and everything. Because otherwise you get caught up on these kind of memes or these ideas, these kind of like these river flows that take you places that you just don't want to go.
Yeah. So now I'm really get get the core message. Great example, because this resonates with me as well. We are too much occupied believing what we learned or what we know is right, but most of the time it's basically wrong, and we cannot feel how wrong what we know is, right? So we need to be aware that we need to learn always, right? And that's what I'm hearing is a philosophy to be always open and learn, and don't believe your map is telling the truth, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like that you can, I'm not saying that you can like throw everything out with the kind of like throw it all out. But what I'm kind of saying is that if you want kind of better, if you want more, you want to achieve kind of higher kind of levels, then doing the same thing as everybody else and expecting to come out in front is insane.
Yeah.
And therefore, you have to be willing to do something different. And doing something different could be, why can't we just question how things are? Doing something different doesn't have to mean that you have to have green hair, you know, and kind of like, you know, look like a punk. Punk is about this. Do you question things? Are you willing to explore things? Are you willing to kind of understand and go further than somebody else, rather than just follow kind of what everybody else and expect different results?
Wonderful. So from your point of view, what does it mean exactly for the work of CX Insights professionals?
I guess it was ask yourself a question. What is the map I'm working to? And how different is that map from the territory?
Yeah.
Because your question is, it's not like, do I understand the map? No, everybody can understand the map, right? The real question is, do you understand the territory? Because that's your job. Not to understand a map, but to understand the territory. Too many people are working off a map and they don't understand the territory.